Welcome back, thrill seekers and fishing enthusiasts. Today, we're diving deep into the darker side of angling. We've all heard fish stories, tales of the one that got away or exaggerated accounts of monster catches. But what about the stories that keep anglers up at night? The ones that make even the bravest fisher think twice about casting their line? In this video, we're going to explore 5 bone-chilling fishing horror stories that will make you question what really lurks beneath the surface. From mysterious creatures to unexplained phenomena, these tales will have you looking over your shoulder the next time you're out on the water. Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling content. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now, let's cast our line into the murky depths of these terrifying tales. Story number 1. The Phantom of Lake Erie. Our first tale takes us to the shores of Lake Erie, where local angler Mike Thompson had an encounter that would change his life forever. It was a crisp autumn evening in 2018, and Mike had decided to try his luck with some night fishing. Little did he know, this routine outing would turn into a nightmare that would haunt him for years to come. Mike Thompson was no amateur when it came to fishing. Born and raised in a small town on the shores of Lake Erie, he had been casting lines into its waters since he was old enough to hold a rod. He knew every cove, every hidden spot where the big ones lurked. But on this fateful night, Mike would discover that his decades of experience had not prepared him for what lurked in the depths of the Great Lake. As Mike tells it, it was October 15th, 2018. I remember the date because it was my wife's birthday, and I had promised her I'd be home early for a nice dinner. But you know how it is with fishing, time just slips away. Mike had set out just before sunset, his small boat cutting through the calm waters as the sky turned a deep orange. He had his favorite spot in mind, a secluded area about a mile offshore where he had landed some impressive catches in the past. The weather was perfect, Mike recalled, his eyes distant as he relived the memory. There was a slight chill in the air, but not enough to be uncomfortable. The lake was like glass, barely a ripple. In hindsight, maybe it was too perfect. As darkness fell, Mike set up his gear. He had brought along his trusty rod, a cooler full of bait, and a powerful flashlight to illuminate the water. For hours, he sat in silence, occasionally recasting his line, but having no luck. I'd been out on the lake for hours, and the fish just weren't biting, Mike continued. It was getting late, past midnight, and I was about to call it a night. I figured I'd give it one last cast before heading home to face my disappointed wife. It was at that moment, just as Mike was ready to give up, that everything changed. I felt a tug on my line, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. It was strong, stronger than anything I'd ever felt before. At first, I thought I must have snagged my hook on something, maybe a submerged log. But then I felt it move. Mike's eyes widened as he recounted the next few moments. I started to reel it in, but it was putting up one hell of a fight. Whatever was on the other end of that line, it was big, and it was angry. What followed was an epic battle between man and unseen beast. Mike struggled with his catch for what seemed like an eternity. His arms ached, muscles screaming in protest as he fought to control his rod. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool night air, and his breath came in ragged gasps. I've caught some big fish in my time, Mike said, shaking his head in disbelief. Monster catfish, sturgeon that could snap a man in half. But this was something else entirely. It felt like I was trying to reel in a submarine. For nearly an hour, the battle raged. Mike's small boat was pulled this way and that, threatening to capsize several times. He considered cutting the line more than once, but a combination of curiosity and stubbornness kept him fighting. Finally, after an exhausting struggle, Mike felt the resistance lessen. Whatever was on his line was tiring, coming closer to the surface. With a final Herculean effort, he managed to bring his catch to the water's surface. I was so excited, Mike recalled, his voice trembling slightly. I thought I had just landed the catch of a lifetime. I grabbed my flashlight and leaned over the side of the boat, ready to shine it on what I was sure would be a record-breaking fish. Mike's voice faltered for a moment, and he took a deep breath before continuing. I shined my flashlight on the water, expecting to see a monster fish, he said. But what I saw, I still can't explain it to this day. According to Mike, what broke the surface wasn't a fish at all. It was a face, a pale, humanoid face with features that seemed both familiar and alien at the same time. The skin was a sickly white, almost translucent, with a texture that reminded Mike of a dead fish's belly. But it was the eyes that truly terrified him. Those eyes, Mike whispered, a haunted look crossing his face. They were huge, black as night, and completely empty. No pupils, no irises, just void. And they were staring right at me. But the horror didn't end there. As Mike watched, frozen in shock and disbelief, the creature's mouth opened, revealing row upon row of razor-sharp teeth. It was like looking into a shark's mouth, Mike said. But worse, because there was intelligence behind those eyes. This thing knew exactly what it was doing. Before Mike could react, the creature let out a sound that he would never forget. It was a shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once, a sound that no human or animal throat could produce. It was high-pitched yet guttural, filled with rage and hunger. That sound, it felt like it was inside my head, Mike said, rubbing his temples as if the memory itself caused him pain. I dropped my flashlight and covered my ears, but it didn't help. I could feel it in my bones, in my teeth. For a second, I thought my head was going to explode. In his moment of disorientation, Mike lost his grip on the rod. He felt a powerful tug, and before he could grab it, the entire rod and reel were pulled over the side of the boat, disappearing into the dark waters below. I saw it dive, Mike said. Just for a second, I caught a glimpse of its body as it went under. It was wrong, like a person but with fins or flippers maybe. And it was big, much bigger than a human. As quickly as it had appeared, the creature vanished, leaving Mike alone in his small boat, surrounded by the vast, dark expanse of Lake Erie. For several minutes, he sat there, unable to move, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. I don't remember much about the trip back to shore, Mike admitted. It's all a blur. I know I was shaking so bad I could barely steer the boat. I kept expecting that thing to burst out of the water and drag me under. When Mike finally made it back to the marina, he was a changed man. His hair, which had been dark brown when he set out, now showed streaks of gray. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, darting around as if expecting danger from every shadow. I've never gone night fishing since, Mike said, his voice trembling. Hell, I can barely bring myself to go out on the lake at all anymore. And I can't shake the feeling that something's watching me whenever I'm near the water. Mike reported his experience to the local authorities, but as one might expect, his story was met with skepticism. They thought I was drunk or that I'd hallucinated the whole thing, Mike said, a note of bitterness in his voice. One officer even suggested it was some kind of elaborate prank. But I know what I saw. It was real and it was out there. Despite the official dismissal of Mike's story, word spread quickly through the local fishing community. To Mike's surprise, he wasn't alone in his experience. Other Lake Erie fishermen came forward with similar tales, stories of strange sightings, unexplained noises, and an oppressive feeling of being watched while out on the water. Some locals speculated that what Mike had encountered could be a yet undiscovered species, perhaps some kind of deep water creature rarely seen by humans. Others, particularly those inclined towards the supernatural, believed it to be a spirit or demon that haunted the lake. I've heard all the theories, Mike said. Some say it's a leftover from prehistoric times, like a lake monster. Others think it might be the result of some government experiment gone wrong. Me, I don't know what to believe anymore. I just know that it's out there, and it's real. The encounter has had a lasting impact on Mike's life. He sold his boat soon after the incident and has since moved further inland. He struggles with nightmares and has been diagnosed with PTSD. Despite the skepticism he's faced, Mike remains adamant about what he saw that night. I know how it sounds, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and frustration. If someone had told me this story before it happened, I'd have thought they were crazy. But I'm telling you, There are things out there in those waters that we can't explain. Things that shouldn't exist, but do. As our interview with Mike came to an end, he left us with a chilling warning. Be careful out there on the water, especially at night. You never know what might be looking back at you from the depths. Sometimes, the things we catch might be better left in the water. Whatever the truth may be about Mike's encounter on Lake Erie, his story serves as a haunting reminder of the mysteries that still lurk in our world's waters. It challenges our understanding of what's possible and what might be hiding just beneath the surface of our reality. That's quite a way to start our list of fishing horror stories. Mike's encounter with the Phantom of Lake Erie is truly the stuff of nightmares. But trust me, we're just getting warmed up. The depths of our lakes, rivers, and oceans hold many more terrifying secrets, and we're about to dive into another one. Before we continue with our next tale, I want to remind you all about our sponsor for this video. They're offering a special discount to our viewers, so make sure to stick around for that information at the end of the video. Now, let's leave the chilly waters of Lake Erie behind and head south. Our next story takes us from the Great Lakes to the murky, mysterious bayous of Louisiana. Get ready for a tale that mixes local legend, ancient curses, and the dangers of ignoring warnings passed down through generations. This next story might make you think twice about venturing into unfamiliar waters in search of the ultimate catch. Story number 2, The Curse of the Bayou. Deep in the heart of Louisiana's Atchafalaya Basin, there's a stretch of swamp that local fishermen refuse to visit. The reason? A curse that's said to have claimed the lives of dozens of unsuspecting anglers over the years. Our story focuses on the experience of James Boudreau, a third-generation Cajun fisherman who decided to ignore the warnings and venture into the forbidden area in search of a legendary catfish said to be as big as a car. The Atchafalaya Basin is a place of mystery and contradiction. It's a wetland paradise, teeming with life, yet also a place of decay and danger. Cypress trees draped in Spanish moss create a canopy that seems to trap secrets within its shadows. For generations, the locals have passed down stories of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances in certain parts of the swamp. James Boudreau grew up hearing these tales, but like many young men, he dismissed them as nothing more than old wives' tales meant to keep children in line and tourists out of trouble. At 32 years old, James was in his prime, confident in his abilities and hungry for a challenge that would cement his reputation as the best fisherman in the parish. I'd heard about this monster catfish for years, James explained when we met him at his home on the outskirts of the basin. My grandpa used to tell me stories about it when I was a boy, said it was as big as a Cadillac and older than the swamp itself. I always thought he was exaggerating, But then I started hearing rumors from other fishermen. Whispers about something big out there in the Forbidden Zone. The Forbidden Zone was a section of the swamp that locals avoided. It didn't appear on any official maps, and tour guides steered clear of it. When asked about it, most old-timers would just shake their heads and mutter something about bad juju or old magic. But James was not one to be deterred by superstition. On a muggy morning in late August, he set out to find the legendary catfish. He rose before dawn, loading his flat-bottom boat with supplies for a long day on the water. His wife, Marie, pleaded with him not to go. She was scared, James recalled, a hint of regret in his voice. Said she had a bad feeling, but I was too stubborn to listen. Told her I'd be back for supper with a fish story she wouldn't believe. James set out as the first light of dawn was breaking over the swamp. He navigated through familiar waterways, the hum of his motor scaring up flocks of egrets and herons. But as he pushed deeper into the basin, following directions he'd coaxed out of a drunk old-timer at the local bar, the atmosphere began to change. It was subtle at first, James said, his eyes distant as he recalled the journey. The air got thicker, harder to breathe, and it was quiet, too quiet. As James ventured further into the Forbidden Zone, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The vibrant ecosystem he knew so well seemed to have vanished, replaced by an eerie stillness. The birds weren't singing, James recalled, his voice dropping to a whisper. And the gators, they were just watching me, not moving, not making a sound. just watching. I've been around gators my whole life, but I've never seen them act like that. It was like they were waiting for something. Despite his growing unease, James pressed on. He was a man on a mission, determined to prove the legends true or false once and for all. After several hours of navigating increasingly narrow and overgrown waterways, he reached a secluded pond that seemed to match the description he'd been given. It was perfect, James said. Still water, lots of cover. If I was a monster catfish, that's where I'd be hiding. James cut the engine and let his boat drift into position. He baited his hook with a special concoction he'd prepared, a mixture of chicken liver, blood, and secret ingredients he refused to disclose. With a practiced flick of his wrist, he cast his line into the murky water, and then he waited. Hours passed without so much as a nibble. The sun climbed high in the sky, its heat trapped by the thick canopy overhead, turning the air into a steamy soup. James rebaited his hook several times, tried different spots around the pond, but nothing seemed to work. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the water, James was about to call it quits. That's when he finally got a bite. "I almost missed it," James admitted. "I was reaching for my water bottle when I felt the slightest tug on the line. But when I grabbed the rod, I knew. This was it." What followed was a battle that would put all of James' skills to the test. Whatever was on the other end of his line was massive, strong enough to nearly pull James out of his boat several times. "It was like trying to reel in a truck," James said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Every time I thought I was making progress, it would dive deep and I'd lose all the line I'd gained. I don't know how long we fought, but by the time I finally started to wear it down, it was almost completely dark." But as James prepared for his moment of triumph, things took a terrifying turn. The moment his hook found purchase, a thick, unnatural fog began to roll in from all sides. "It was like nothing I've ever seen," James said, his voice trembling at the memory. This wasn't normal swamp fog. It was alive somehow, moving with purpose. Within seconds, James found himself enveloped in an impenetrable white mist. The familiar sounds of the swamp were muffled, replaced by an oppressive silence. "I couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction," James recounted. "And then I started hearing voices, whispers at first, then screams. It sounded like they were coming from underwater." Panicked, James tried to reel in his line, hoping to cut it and make a quick escape. But to his horror, he found that the line wouldn't budge. Instead, he felt his boat begin to move, pulled by some unseen force towards the center of the pond. "I was terrified," James admitted. "I thought about jumping out and swimming for it, but something told me that would be even worse. So I just held on, praying for it to end." As the boat moved, the whispers grew louder. James swears he could make out words in a language he'd never heard before, guttural sounds that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his soul. "I don't know how to explain it," he said, struggling to find the words. "But I understood them even though I didn't know the language. They were calling me, promising me things. Power, knowledge, eternal life. All I had to do was let go, jump in and join them." James found himself standing up in the boat, swaying as if in a trance. He was about to step over the side when a moment of clarity hit him. "I thought of Marie," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "Of our kids, and I knew I couldn't do it. Whatever was down there, whatever it was offering, it wasn't worth losing them." With a Herculean effort of will, James grabbed his knife and slashed at his fishing line. The moment it snapped, everything changed. The fog dissipated as quickly as it had appeared. The whispers faded, and James found himself alone in his boat in the gathering darkness. "I've never moved so fast in my life," James said. "I fired up that motor and got out of there as quick as I could. Didn't even look back." But James' ordeal wasn't over. In the weeks that followed, he was plagued by nightmares of drowning and strange occurrences around his home. Fish he'd caught would rot at impossible speeds, and he often woke to find his fishing gear rearranged or missing altogether. It was like whatever was in that pond had followed me home, James explained. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I was starting to think I was going crazy. The final straw came about a month after his experience in the Forbidden Zone. One morning, James went to check on his boat and found a strange symbol carved into the hull. A complex arrangement of lines and curves that made his head hurt to look at. I recognized it from my nightmares, James said, his face pale at the memory. That's when I knew it wasn't just in my head. It was real, and it wasn't going to leave me alone. That was the day James Boudreau decided to give up fishing for good. He sold his boat, gave away his gear, and took a job at a local factory. He hasn't been near the water since. To this day, James refuses to speak about what he saw in the bayou to anyone but the closest family and friends. When pressed for details, he becomes visibly uncomfortable, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Some things are better left alone, he told us as our interview concluded. That catfish, if that's what it really was, it's not meant to be caught. And that part of the swamp, it's forbidden for a reason. I learned that the hard way. James' story has since become part of the local lore, a cautionary tale passed down to young fishermen tempted by the allure of a legendary catch. It serves as a chilling reminder that in the dark waters of the Atchafalaya Basin, some secrets are best left undiscovered. If you're ever out in the swamp, James said, his final words to us tinged with fear and warning, and you feel like something's not right, trust that feeling. Get out of there as fast as you can. Because sometimes, the price of curiosity is far too high. I couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction, James recounted. And then I started hearing voices, whispers at first, then screams. It sounded like they were coming from underwater. Panicked, James tried to reel in his line, hoping to cut it and make a quick escape. But to his horror, he found that the line wouldn't budge. Instead, he felt his boat begin to move, pulled by some unseen force towards the center of the pond. I was terrified, James admitted. I thought about jumping out and swimming for it, but something told me that would be even worse. So I just held on, praying for it to end. As the boat moved, the whispers grew louder. James swears he could make out words in a language he'd never heard before, guttural sounds that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his soul. I don't know how to explain it, he said, struggling to find the words. But I understood them even though I didn't know the language. They were calling me, promising me things. Power, knowledge, eternal life. All I had to do was let go, jump in and join them. James found himself standing up in the boat, swaying as if in a trance. He was about to step over the side when a moment of clarity hit him. I thought of Marie, he said, tears welling in his eyes. Of our kids, and I knew I couldn't do it. Whatever was down there, whatever it was offering, it wasn't worth losing them. With a Herculean effort of will, James grabbed his knife and slashed at his fishing line. The moment it snapped, everything changed. The fog dissipated as quickly as it had appeared. The whispers faded, and James found himself alone in his boat in the gathering darkness. I've never moved so fast in my life, James said. I fired up that motor and got out of there as quick as I could. Didn't even look back. But James' ordeal wasn't over. In the weeks that followed, he was plagued by nightmares of drowning and strange occurrences around his home. Fish he'd caught would rot at impossible speeds, and he often woke to find his fishing gear rearranged or missing altogether. It was like, whatever was in that pond had followed me home, James explained. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I was starting to think I was going crazy. The final straw came about a month after his experience in the Forbidden Zone. One morning, James went to check on his boat and found a strange symbol carved into the hull. A complex arrangement of lines and curves that made his head hurt to look at. I recognized it from my nightmares, James said, his face pale at the memory. That's when I knew it wasn't just in my head. It was real, and it wasn't going to leave me alone. That was the day James Boudreau decided to give up fishing for good. He sold his boat, gave away his gear, and took a job at a local factory. He hasn't been near the water since. To this day, James refuses to speak about what he saw in the bayou to anyone but the closest family and friends. When pressed for details, he becomes visibly uncomfortable, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. "Some things are better left alone," he told us as our interview concluded. "That catfish, if that's what it really was, it's not meant to be caught. And that part of the swamp, it's forbidden for a reason. I learned that the hard way." James' story has since become part of the local lore, a cautionary tale passed down to young fishermen tempted by the allure of a legendary catch. It serves as a chilling reminder that in the dark waters of the Atchafalaya Basin, some secrets are best left undiscovered. "If you're ever out in the swamp," James said, his final words to us tinged with fear and warning, "and you feel like something's not right, trust that feeling. Get out of there as fast as you can. Because sometimes, the price of curiosity is far too high." Wow, James Boudreau's encounter in the cursed waters of the Atchafalaya Basin is truly chilling. It's a stark reminder that there are some places in this world where the boundary between our reality and something else is terrifyingly thin. This tale is enough to make anyone think twice about venturing into unfamiliar waters, especially those shrouded in local legend and superstition. But we're not done yet, folks. We've got 3 more spine-tingling stories to share, each one delving deeper into the unknown terrors that lurk beneath the surface of our world's waters. But before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to hear from you, our viewers. Have you ever had a spooky or unexplainable experience while out fishing? Maybe you've heard local legends similar to the curse of the Atchafalaya Basin? We'd love to hear about them. Leave a comment below describing your scariest moment on the water. Your story might even inspire a future video. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying these terrifying tales. It really helps us bring more content like this to you. Now, let's leave the humid, haunted bayous of Louisiana behind and head north for our next story. We're trading alligators for icebergs as we journey to the frigid, unforgiving waters of Alaska. Get ready for a tale that will send chills down your spine, and not just because of the cold. The team spent their first 2 days setting up camp and preparing their equipment. The work was challenging in the extreme cold, but they were well prepared and made good progress. By the 3rd day, they were ready to begin their research in earnest. "That's when things started to get strange," Sarah said, a shadow crossing her face at the memory. On the morning of the 3rd day, the team awoke to find their camp eerily quiet. The generator, which had been humming steadily since their arrival, had stopped working during the night. The temperature in their tents had dropped dangerously low, and frost covered their sleeping bags. "We couldn't figure out what had happened," Sarah recalled. "The generator was full of fuel, and Mark, who was good with engines, couldn't find anything wrong with it. It just wouldn't start." As the day progressed, other small but unsettling occurrences piled up. Equipment that had been working perfectly the day before began to malfunction. Compass needles spun wildly, refusing to settle on a direction. Even their high-tech GPS units were acting up, showing their location as being miles from where they knew they were. "It was frustrating," Sarah said. "We'd planned this expedition meticulously, and suddenly nothing was working as it should. But we're scientists, you know? We look for rational explanations. We thought maybe there was some kind of magnetic anomaly in the area affecting our equipment." That night, unable to sleep and feeling increasingly uneasy, Sarah decided to do some ice fishing. The lake was frozen solid, and she figured it would be a good opportunity to collect some additional data on the local fish population. "I told myself I was just being proactive," Sarah admitted. "But honestly, I think I needed to feel like I was doing something useful. The quiet out there, it was starting to get to me." Sarah gathered her gear and made her way out onto the ice. The night was clear and bitterly cold, the stars blazing overhead with an intensity rarely seen in more populated areas. The aurora borealis danced across the sky, casting an ethereal green glow over the frozen landscape. "It was beautiful," Sarah said, "but also oppressive somehow, like the whole sky was pressing down on me." Sarah found a spot about 100 yards from shore and set up her equipment. She drilled a hole through the thick ice and dropped her line into the dark water below. I set up my gear and settled in to wait, Sarah recounted. It was so quiet out there. No wind, no animal sounds. Just the occasional crack of the ice. I remember thinking how strange it was. Usually, even in winter, you'd hear something, an owl, maybe, or a fox. But there was nothing. As Sarah waited for a bite, she found her gaze drawn to the ice beneath her feet. At first, she dismissed the strange shadows she saw as tricks of the light reflections of the aurora playing across the frozen surface. But as she looked closer, she realized she was seeing something impossible. There were structures under the ice, Sarah said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and lingering fear. Buildings, boats, even what looked like people frozen in mid-motion. It was like looking down at a village that had been flash frozen in an instant. Startled and disbelieving, Sarah scrambled back from the hole, her heart pounding. That's when she heard it, a faint sound coming from beneath the ice, a sound that should have been impossible. It sounded like singing, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know how crazy it sounds, but I swear that's what I heard. I pressed my ear to the ice, and I could hear it clearly. It was a group of voices, singing in a language I didn't understand. And it was coming from directly beneath me. Terrified, Sarah gathered her gear and ran back to camp. She burst into her teammates' tents, babbling about what she had seen and heard. Skeptical but concerned by Sarah's obvious distress, Mark and Emily agreed to return to the ice with her. I was sure they'd see it too, Sarah said. I mean, how could they miss it? An entire village, right there under our feet. But when they arrived at the spot where Sarah had been fishing, there was nothing to see. The ice was clear, showing only the dark water below. No matter where they looked, they could find no trace of the structure Sarah had described. They thought I was losing it, Sarah admitted. To be honest, I was starting to think the same thing. I mean, I'm a scientist. I deal in facts, in things I can observe and measure. What I'd seen, it didn't make any sense. The team decided to cut short their expedition and leave the next morning. As they were packing up their camp, their guide, Thomas, arrived. He looked pale and shaken, his usual stoic demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. He told us that he'd been wrong about the village, Sarah explained. It hadn't been abandoned. According to the story he'd just been told by a local elder, the entire village had vanished overnight nearly a century ago. The inhabitants, their homes, everything, just gone without a trace. The implications of what Sarah had seen chilled her to the bone. Had she witnessed a moment frozen in time, parallel dimension, or something even more inexplicable? I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head, Sarah said, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe it was some kind of mass hallucination brought on by isolation and extreme cold. Maybe there was some kind of gas leaking from under the ice that caused us all to experience similar delusions. But none of those explanations feel right. Deep down, I know what I saw was real. In the years since her experience, Sarah has struggled to reconcile what she witnessed with her scientific worldview. She's researched similar incidents, delved into the folklore of the region, and even explored fringe theories about time slips and parallel universes. I found some interesting stories, Sarah told us. Accounts of whole ship's crews vanishing in the Arctic, of explorers stumbling into impossible landscapes. There's a rich tradition of what the Inuit call oxalak, moving land, places that aren't always where or when they're supposed to be. But for all her research, Sarah has found no definitive answers. The unnamed lake remains unmarked on official maps, and the local tribes still avoid the area. Sarah's attempts to organize a follow-up expedition have been met with resistance from both scientific institutions and native groups. I understand their hesitation, Sarah said. What we experienced there, it challenges everything we think we know about reality. And maybe that's not something everyone is ready to face. The experience has had a profound impact on Sarah's life and career. While she continues her work in marine biology, she's become more open to exploring the boundaries between science and the unexplained. I'm not saying we should abandon scientific rigor, Sarah explained. But I think we need to be more open to the possibility that there are things in this world that don't fit neatly into our current understanding of physics and natural law, especially in places like Alaska, where the wilderness is so vast and untamed. There are secrets out there, waiting to be discovered. As our interview with Sarah drew to a close, we asked her if she would ever return to the unnamed lake if given the opportunity. "Part of me wants to," she admitted, a mix of fear and longing in her eyes, "to prove to myself that it was real, to try and understand what happened. But another part of me, I don't know. There's a reason why some places remain unexplored, why some mysteries endure. Maybe there are some things we're not meant to understand." Sarah's experience serves as a haunting reminder that in the vast wilderness of Alaska, where the aurora paints the sky and the long winter nights seem endless, the line between reality and the impossible can blur. It challenges us to question our assumptions about the nature of our world and suggests that perhaps, in certain remote corners of our planet, the rules we take for granted don't always apply. Whatever the truth behind Sarah's encounter with the vanishing village, her story continues to captivate and unsettle those who hear it. It stands as a testament to the enduring mystery of the Alaskan wilderness and a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest horrors are not what we can see, but what we can't explain. Sarah Kowalski's encounter with the impossible beneath the ice of that unnamed Alaskan lake is truly mind-bending. It challenges our understanding of reality and makes us question what other secrets might be hiding in the remote corners of our world. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to think twice about my next fishing trip, especially if it involves ice fishing in Alaska. We're more than halfway through our list of terrifying fishing tales, but trust me, we've saved some of the best for last. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank all of you who have subscribed to our channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you these spine-tingling stories. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button now. And for those of you who are enjoying these tales, why not share this video with a friend who loves a good scare? You never know. It might just save them from a terrifying fishing experience of their own. Now, let's leave the icy mysteries of Alaska behind and head to warmer waters for our next tale. Pack your sunscreen and maybe a good luck charm because we're going to the Florida Keys. But be warned, the crystal clear waters of this tropical paradise hide dangers that are all too real. Our fourth story takes us from the icy waters of Alaska to the sun-soaked shores of the Florida Keys, where the beauty of the ocean hides dark secrets beneath its sparkling surface. In this tropical paradise, where crystal clear waters and vibrant coral reefs attract thousands of tourists each year, one man's terrifying experience serves as a chilling reminder that some mysteries of the sea are better left undiscovered. This haunting tale comes from Dave Martinez, an experienced charter boat captain with over 2 decades of navigating the waters around the Keys. Dave's encounter with the inexplicable not only challenged everything he thought he knew about the sea, but also left him with a burden he'll carry for the rest of his life. Dave Martinez was born and raised in Key West. The son of a fisherman, he grew up with salt water in his veins and a deep respect for the ocean. By the time he was 30, Dave had earned a reputation as one of the best charter captains in the Keys, known for his uncanny ability to find the best fishing spots and his encyclopedic knowledge of the local waters. "I thought I knew these waters like the back of my hand," Dave told us, his weathered face creased with lines that spoke of long hours under the sun. "I'd seen storms that could swallow whole islands, fish bigger than cars, and sunsets that could make a grown man weep. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that day." The day in question was August 15th, 2021. It started like any other for Dave, an early morning departure from the marina with a group of 6 tourists eager for a day of deep-sea fishing. The group was a mix of ages and backgrounds. A retired couple from Ohio, Tom and Linda, a father and son duo from New York, Mike and young Timmy, and 2 college friends from California, Jessica and Sarah. They were a good group, Dave recalled. Excited, you know? Some of them had never been deep-sea fishing before. "I remember thinking it was going to be a great day. The weather was perfect, clear blue skies, a light breeze and calm seas." Dave took the group to one of his favorite spots, a secluded area about 20 miles offshore known for its abundance of grouper and snapper. The day proved to be successful, with everyone on board catching their fill of fish. "We were having a blast," Dave said. "The fish were biting. Everyone was laughing and having a good time. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a job where I could be part of days like this." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Dave decided to make one last stop before heading back to the marina. He had a spot in mind, a place he'd heard about from other captains but had never visited himself. "I don't know why I decided to go there," Dave admitted, a shadow crossing his face. "Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was wanting to give my clients one last thrill. If I could go back, God, if I could go back, I'd have headed straight for home." Dave steered the boat towards the coordinates he'd been given. As they approached, he saw a small, uninhabited island appear on the horizon. It wasn't on any of his charts, which struck him as odd, but not impossible. "I'd never seen this island before," Dave recalled. "But in the Keys, that's not too unusual. Sandbars appear and disappear all the time. I figured it was just a new formation that hadn't been mapped yet." Dave anchored the boat about 100 yards from the shore. The island was small, maybe half a mile across, with a dense covering of tropical vegetation. A pristine white beach ringed the island, glowing softly in the fading light. "It was beautiful," Dave said, "like something out of a travel brochure. I remember thinking it would make a great spot for a picnic or a swim." As the group prepared to cast their lines one last time, something strange happened. A sound drifted across the water from the direction of the island. At first, Dave thought it was the wind in the trees, but as he listened, he realized it was something else entirely. "It was singing," Dave said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The most beautiful singing I've ever heard. It was like every beautiful sound in the world had been rolled into one. I can't even begin to describe it." The entire group fell silent, entranced by the otherworldly melody. Dave watched as his passengers' faces took on a dreamy, almost euphoric expression. "We were all mesmerized," Dave said. "It was like the music was calling to us personally, like it knew each of our deepest desires and was promising to fulfill them." Before Dave could react, one of the tourists, Tom, the retired man from Ohio, suddenly dove into the water and began swimming towards the island. His wife, Linda, called out to him, but her voice seemed to have no effect. "It happened so fast," Dave recalled, the memory clearly painful. "One second Tom was on the boat, the next he was in the water, and then the others started following. One by one, the rest of the passengers dove into the sea. Mike, the father from New York, tried to stop his son Timmy, but the boy slipped from his grasp and plunged into the waves. In his attempt to save Timmy, Mike too ended up in the water. Jessica and Sarah, the college friends, were the last to go, holding hands as they jumped together. Dave, who had been standing at the helm, felt the pull of the music too. He described it as an almost physical sensation, like hands trying to draw him towards the water. "I wanted to jump in," Dave admitted, his voice shaking. "God help me. I wanted to jump in so badly. The music, it was promising things I'd always wanted but never thought I could have. It took everything I had to resist." Something in the back of Dave's mind, some deeply ingrained survival instinct, told him to resist. He watched in horror as his passengers swam towards the island, which now seemed to be shrouded in a strange, shimmering mist. "I tried to start the engine to go after them," Dave explained, his hands trembling as he recounted the moment. "But it wouldn't turn over. Nothing on the boat worked. The radio, the GPS, even my cell phone. It was like all the power had been drained." Helpless, Dave watched as his passengers disappeared into the mist. The singing grew louder, reaching a fever pitch that seemed to make the very air vibrate. And then suddenly it stopped. "The silence," Dave said. "That silence was the worst thing I've ever experienced. It was like the whole world was holding its breath." In that moment of silence, Dave heard something that still haunts his nightmares. A chorus of terrified screams, quickly silenced. "It was them," Dave said, tears welling in his eyes. "I knew it was them. They were screaming. God, the fear in those screams. And then, nothing. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the island and the mist vanished. One moment it was there, the next there was nothing but open water. Dave found himself alone on his boat in the gathering darkness, with no sign of his passengers or the mysterious island. I don't know how long I sat there, Dave recalled. Minutes, hours, maybe. I was in shock. When I finally came to my senses, I tried the engine again, and this time it started. I headed back to the marina as fast as I could. Dave immediately reported the incident to the Coast Guard, who launched a massive search and rescue operation. For days, ships and planes scoured the area where Dave claimed the island had been, but no trace of the missing tourists or the island was ever found. The official investigation was inconclusive. Dave's story was met with skepticism by the authorities. Some suggested that he had fabricated the tale to cover up an accident or his own negligence. Others proposed more rational explanations, that the group had encountered a toxic algal bloom that caused mass hallucinations, or that some kind of gas leak on the boat had affected everyone's minds. They thought I was crazy, Dave said bitterly, or worse, that I'd done something to those people. But I know what I saw, what I heard. It was real. The incident took a heavy toll on Dave. He lost his charter license and became something of a pariah in the Key West community. Many of his fellow captains shunned him, afraid that his craziness might be contagious. The families of the missing tourists launched lawsuits, though these were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence. In the years since that fateful day, Dave has dedicated himself to researching similar incidents and collecting stories from other sailors who claim to have encountered inexplicable phenomena at sea. He's delved into maritime folklore, studying tales of ghost ships, sea monsters, and islands that appear and disappear. There's more out there than we know, Dave insists. The ocean, it's not just water and fish. There are things in it, things that have been there long before us and will be there long after we're gone. And sometimes those things get hungry. Dave has never returned to that part of the Keys. He rarely goes out on the water at all these days, preferring to keep his feet firmly on dry land. But he feels a responsibility to warn others about what he experienced. I know most people won't believe me, Dave said, and part of me hopes they never have to. But if my story can save even one person from experiencing what I did, from feeling the guilt I feel every day, then it's worth telling. As our interview with Dave drew to a close, we asked him if he had any final thoughts to share. Be careful out there, he said, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting to see the mysterious island reappear at any moment. The sea is beautiful, but it's also dangerous, and not all the dangers come from things you can see. If you're out on the water and you hear singing, beautiful singing that seems to call to you personally, for God's sake, don't listen. Cover your ears, turn your boat around, and get out of there as fast as you can. Because if you don't, you might never come back. Dave's story serves as a chilling reminder that even in the sun-drenched paradise of the Florida Keys, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface. It challenges our understanding of the natural world and suggests that perhaps, in the vast expanse of the ocean, there are forces at work that defy explanation. Whether Dave's experience was the result of a supernatural encounter, a natural phenomenon we don't yet understand, or something else entirely, it stands as a haunting testament to the enduring mystery of the sea. It reminds us that for all our technological advances and scientific understanding, the ocean remains a place of wonder, beauty, and terror, a realm where the line between reality and nightmare can blur in the blink of an eye. Host: well, folks, I don't know about you, but I think I'll be staying away from mysterious islands and enchanting melodies on my next beach vacation. Dave Martinez's encounter with whatever lurks in the waters of the Florida Keys is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things can be the most dangerous. We've now heard four terrifying tales from the water, each one more unsettling than the last. From the phantom creature in Lake Erie to the cursed bayou of Louisiana, from the vanishing village beneath Alaskan ice to the siren's call in the Florida Keys. These stories have taken us on a journey through some of the darkest corners of the fishing world. But believe it or not, we've got one more story to go, and trust me, we've saved the most chilling for last. Before we dive into our final tale, I want to remind you all about our merchandise. We've got t-shirts, hats, and even fishing lures featuring designs inspired by the stories in this video. Who knows? Maybe wearing one of our "I Survived the Siren's Call" shirts will protect you on your next fishing trip. Check out the link in the description below to get your hands on some truly unique gear. Now, brace yourselves for our final tale. We're leaving the shores behind and heading to the deep sea for this one, where the darkness hides untold horrors. In the vast expanse of the open ocean, where the water runs deep and dark, we'll discover that sometimes the greatest terrors are those we can't even begin to comprehend. Our final story comes from the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where the water runs deep and dark, hiding secrets that man was never meant to discover. This tale was shared by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a marine biologist who was part of a deep-sea research expedition gone horribly wrong. The expedition's goal was to study the ecosystem around hydrothermal vents in the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the world's oceans. They were using a state-of-the-art submersible capable of withstanding the crushing pressures of the deep. On the final dive of their mission, Elena and her colleague, Dr. Mark Chun, descended to a depth of over 10,000 meters. As they approached the sea floor, their lights illuminated a landscape that seemed almost alien. It was like nothing we'd ever seen before, Elena recalled. The rock formations, the creatures, everything was just wrong somehow. As they explored, Mark noticed something reflecting their lights in the distance. Curious, they maneuvered the submersible closer to investigate. What we saw, it defies explanation, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. It looked like a city, an ancient, underwater city with architecture that couldn't have been made by human hands. But it wasn't the impossible city that filled Elena with terror. It was what they saw next. Something moved in the darkness beyond our lights, she continued. Something massive. We could feel the water displacement rocking our submersible. Then, their lights flickered and died, plunging them into total darkness. In that moment of blackness, both Elena and Mark felt a presence, an ancient, alien consciousness that pressed against their minds. It was like it was trying to communicate, Elena explained, but not with words, with images, feelings. I saw things that I can't even begin to describe. Cities that couldn't exist, creatures that shouldn't be possible. And I understood that we were nothing, less than nothing. When the lights came back on seconds later, both scientists were changed. Mark was catatonic, his eyes wide and unseeing. Elena was shaking uncontrollably, unable to speak. Somehow, Elena managed to pilot the submersible back to the surface. Mark was immediately hospitalized and hasn't spoken a word since. Elena spent months in therapy, trying to process what she had experienced. I know how it sounds, Elena said, but I know what I saw, what I felt. There are things down there in the deep, things that have been there long before us and will be there long after we're gone. And they're aware of us now. Elena has since left her job and refuses to go near the ocean. She spends her days researching ancient myths and legends, convinced that our ancestors knew about these deep-sea entities and tried to warn us through their stories. We think we're the masters of this planet, Elena warned, but we're just guests here, and some of the real inhabitants don't appreciate our intrusion. And there you have it, folks. 5 terrifying fishing horror stories that might make you think twice before casting your line. From phantom creatures in Lake Erie to ancient horrors in the deepest parts of the ocean, it seems that danger can lurk in any body of water. But don't let these tales scare you away from fishing altogether. After all, for every scary story, there are thousands of peaceful, enjoyable fishing trips. Just remember to respect the water, be aware of your surroundings, and maybe, just maybe, be prepared for the unexpected. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.